Dear compatriots, we, the cosmonauts of Roscosmos Alexei Ovchinin, Ivan Wagner, and Kirill Peskov wholeheartedly congratulate you on Cosmonautics Day. In our country, space has always been more than just a profession.
This is how the ISS crew congratulated all Russians and colleagues on Cosmonautics Day. Ovchinin, Wagner, and Peskov thanked the specialists of the rocket and space industry and wished them new victories in orbit. According to them, space in the country has always been more than just a profession. Cosmonautics Day is celebrated in honor of the first orbital flight in history, which was made by Yuri Gagarin on April 12, 1961. He spent 108 minutes in space and safely returned to Earth. On RBC, the main news. In the studio, Marina Lapteva. Ukraine can be divided after the end of hostilities, just as Germany was in 1945, said the special representative of the U.S. President, Keith Kellogg, in an interview with The Times. According to him, the Allied forces of Kiev, namely the Anglo-French contingent, could be stationed in the western part of the country, while the Russian army would be on the eastern territories. The article refers to regions that became part of Russia, but were not recognized by Washington. Kellogg emphasized the following in an interview. The situation under a peace agreement could resemble Berlin after World War II, where there were Russian, French, British, and American zones of influence. However, after the Times article was published, the U.S. President's special representative stated that his words were misinterpreted. He clarified on his social media that he did not speak about dividing Ukraine into zones of influence. The discussion was, quote, about forces ensuring stability after a ceasefire, supporting the country's sovereignty. Kellogg also mentioned in the Times interview that the presence of an Anglo-French contingent would not be provocative for Russia. Another U.S. President's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, outlined a way to achieve a ceasefire in Ukraine. He told Donald Trump that Washington should recognize the 4 annexed regions as Russian. Reuters reports this, citing sources. The U.S. may grant some countries exemptions from customs duties, but 10% is the minimum threshold. Donald Trump made this statement. He emphasized that Washington wants to act fairly. In his opinion, American partners have a choice. They can pay, negotiate tariffs, or simply refuse to cooperate with the U.S. if they find the duties too high. Trump also noted that, contrary to popular belief, the market downturn was not the reason for halting the tariff increases. However, he did not specify the exact reason.
I think the bond market is doing well. There were some minor difficulties, but I quickly solved the problem. I'm very good at this. We had the most important...
A day in history, and everything was not as many say. I want to put the country in an incredible economic position where we should be. People understand what we are doing. I think the dollar will rise significantly. The dollar is huge, and it will be stronger than ever.
The U.S. disagreements with China over high tariffs should end well, Trump believes. In his opinion, something positive should ultimately come out of the situation. Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei agreed to negotiations with the U.S. on the nuclear program under the threat of losing power. This was reported by the New York Times, citing sources in Tehran. According to them, Khamenei's close associates pressured him last month to lift the ban on dialogue with Washington. If negotiations with the White House were refused, a situation could arise where the U.S. with Israel might attack Iran. This would provoke a large-scale war that would devastate the economy of the Islamic Republic and trigger protests within the country. Contacts between Iran and the U.S. will take place today in Oman. The plan is to agree on the framework for negotiations and the schedule for further consultations. Iran will be represented by the Foreign Minister of the Islamic Republic, Abbas Araghchi, and Washington by the Special Envoy for the Middle East, Steve Witkoff.
These will be direct talks with the Iranians. We need direct talks with the Iranians. These will be direct talks with the Iranians. I also spoke with President Trump about his goal regarding Iran. And he has repeatedly stated to all of you publicly and also privately to his team here at the White House that his ultimate goal and final task is to ensure that Iran can never acquire nuclear weapons. The president believes in diplomacy. Direct talks in one room to achieve this goal. But he made it clear to the Iranians on his national security team that all options were on the table and Iran had to act. A choice. Tehran can agree to President Trump's demands, or you will have to pay a hellish price.
Tehran must not possess nuclear weapons, stated U.S. President Donald Trump. At the same time, he said, Iran should become a happy and great country